Sylvester Stallone returns to a legendary film studio after decades away, invited to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Rocky. Dressed simply, quiet and focused, he walks through the iconic soundstage where it all began. But just before the cameras start rolling, he notices something. A janitor sweeping alone in the corner. At first, he doesn't recognize him. The man wears a faded jumpsuit, head down, moving like someone who's worked in silence for years. But the moment their eyes meet, Stallone freezes. He knows that face. What happens next leaves the entire crew speechless and uncovers a forgotten story that changes everything Stallone thought he knew about his past. But before we continue this incredible moment, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy emotional real-life stories like this, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow at 6 p.m., we're sharing another powerful story you won't want to miss. He almost didn't see the man, but something, maybe the way he moved, maybe the silence around him, stopped Stallone in his tracks. The man wasn't trying to be noticed. He was sweeping the corner of stage 12 like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Slow, precise, invisible. It had been decades since Stallone had walked those same halls. The old studio lot in Burbank hadn't changed much, but the world around it had. The air still smelled like sawdust and machine grease. The concrete still echoed with hurried footsteps, late calls, and forgotten dreams. But this time, Stallone wasn't here to make a movie. He was here to say goodbye. A farewell special. 50 years of Rocky. Interviews, tributes, a few tears. The producers wanted him to walk through the original set for nostalgia. The lighting rig had been adjusted to mimic the late afternoon of 1975. They even rebuilt the alley behind Mickey's gym. But it wasn't the scenery that hit him. It was the silence. And the janitor. He stood near the edge of the stage, staring. Gray jumpsuit, a ball cap too low, head down, pushing a broom across the same floor where Stallone once shadowboxed into greatness. At first, it was just a feeling, that strange déjà vu that whispers to your gut before your brain can catch up. Stallone didn't recognize the man's face, not immediately, but something was there, a rhythm, a presence. Then, the man looked up, and Stallone's breath caught. His face was worn, more than time alone should allow. Deep lines etched from years of silence. But his eyes, those eyes, they were younger in Stallone's memory, set in a face half lit by alley shadows, but unmistakable. "Tony?" Stallone's voice cracked before he even realized he'd spoken. The janitor froze. For half a second, his hand still gripped the broom like it was armor. Then he smiled, small, almost embarrassed. "Sylvester," he said softly. "Wasn't sure if you'd remember." But that wasn't what stunned Stallone. It was the way he said it, like he never expected anyone to remember him again. The room spun backward. 1975. Rocky wasn't a blockbuster yet. It was a risk, a hope. Stallone was still broke, still hustling, still rewriting scenes between takes. And Tony? Tony was a kid. One of the extras during the meat-packing warehouse scene. Barely 19, quiet, but always helping everyone else hit their marks. He didn't have lines. He didn't need them. His job was to lift crates and look invisible. But one afternoon after a camera jam, Stallone had improvised a line, turning to Tony mid-take and asking, "You ever feel like life's beaten you down so hard even your shadow gives up?" Tony had laughed, naturally, off script. The take never made it to the final cut, but that moment had stayed with both of them. Back in the present, Stallone stepped forward. "What the hell are you doing here?" he asked, not in anger, but in disbelief. Tony chuckled. "Working. Just working." "You're a janitor now." Tony nodded. "Been one for about 20 years. Therefore, Stallone felt something heavy settle in his chest. Not pity, not shame, something else. Something that looked a lot like regret. He walked past the cameras, past the producers whispering about timing and lighting. They didn't matter. Not right now. Why didn't you ever reach out? Stallone asked. Tony looked around, as if the walls might collapse if he spoke too loudly. You were out there, man. I was just here. I figured you wouldn't remember. But I did, Stallone whispered. He remembered more than that. He remembered the way Tony held his stance, the way he kept showing up even when others quit, the way he offered Stallone a coffee once after a long shoot without asking for anything in return. And now he was here, sweeping up history. The producers called for a break. Marla, a young woman with a headset and clipboard bigger than her torso, jogged over. Mr. Stallone, we need you to reset on stage 7 for the monologue shot. He waved her off. We'll wait, he said, eyes still on Tony. The silence stretched. Tony leaned on his broom, shifting his weight. I never did much after Rocky. Just a few gigs, background work. Life got complicated. Stallone nodded, not pressing. The light above them buzzed softly. Outside, a leaf blower roared to life. Inside Stallone's chest, something cracked. You want to walk the old set with me? He asked. One more time? Tony blinked, then nodded. They walked slowly, side by side. Past the lockers where Rocky changed. Past the ring ropes they'd both once brushed against. Past the echoes of a world that had moved on. Tony didn't say much, but Stallone noticed something in the way he touched the walls, like a man running his fingers over his own memory. They stopped at the meat locker replica. The hooks no longer held slabs of beef, just plastic props, but the cold air was the same. So was the silence. This place made legends, Stallone said. Tony smiled. Yeah, he whispered. Just never thought I'd still be here to see it fall apart. And then, without warning, Tony turned. You know what I remember most? He said. That day you looked at me like I mattered. Just for a second. That was enough. Stallone felt his throat close. He didn't have a reply. But he didn't need one. Because some memories speak louder in silence. And as the lights dimmed behind them and the crew started packing up for the next shot, Stallone knew this tribute wasn't about Rocky anymore. It was about Tony, and all the other people history forgets. Just as they were about to part ways, Tony reached into his janitor's locker and pulled something out. A faded piece of fabric, wrapped in plastic. It was the original Rocky crew shirt from 1975, folded perfectly, untouched. I kept it, Tony said quietly. Figured someday it might mean something again. Stallone's eyes widened, but before he could respond, Marla's voice echoed across the soundstage. Mr. Stallone, NBC just arrived. They're requesting a live tribute segment with you and your special guest. Are you ready? Tony hesitated, the old crew shirt clutched in his weathered hands. Stallone stared at it like it was a sacred relic, because to him, it was. Not because of the logo, not because it said Rocky, but because someone had cared enough to keep it. Why'd you hold on to it all these years? Stallone finally asked, voice low. Tony shrugged. Felt like the only thing I was ever part of that mattered. But it was more than that. It was the last thread tying him to a dream, long buried. The NBC crew began setting up their lights and cameras. Makeup artists hovered nearby like flies, patting Stallone's forehead and brushing his jacket. He let them do it, but his eyes never left Tony. Hey, Stallone said to one of the producers, can he join me for the tribute? The young man blinked, confused. Who? The janitor? Stallone didn't even flinch. His name's Tony, and yeah, he's coming. There was hesitation, then silence, then the slow, reluctant nod. Tony watched it all from a distance, unsure whether to smile or run. When Stallone turned back, he handed the shirt over. Wear it, he said. I don't care what anyone says. The cameras rolled. The host began her scripted introduction, but Stallone interrupted before she could finish. I want to say something off script, he said. The studio tensed. but the cameras kept rolling. Stallone looked to Tony, who stood just outside frame, still clutching the shirt. "There's a man here who never had a line, never had his name in the credits. But I wouldn't be here without him." Tony flinched. His hand gripped the shirt tighter. Tony was one of the extras in the original Rocky. You wouldn't recognize him. Most people wouldn't. But he was there, every day, lifting, working, showing up. He turned to the host. "And sometimes the people who change our lives the most are the ones we never see coming." After the segment, the set broke into polite applause. Tony tried to step away, but Stallone stopped him. "Come with me." "To where?" "Just walk." They slipped out the back of the studio, down a corridor that hadn't changed since the 70s. Rusted pipes, old lockers, the faint smell of sweat and dust. Stallone paused near one of the lockers. "This one used to be mine," he said. He opened it slowly. Inside was a photo, taped crooked, a behind-the-scenes shot of Rocky. Stallone, the director, a few of the crew. And in the far corner, barely visible, was Tony. Young, smiling, forgotten. "I've seen this picture 100 times, Stallone whispered, "and I never noticed you were in it." Tony laughed, a dry, soft sound. "I got used to that." They sat on an old bench nearby, the kind with peeling paint and warped wood. "Can I ask you something?" Stallone said. "Shoot. Why didn't you chase it?" "Chase what?" "More. You were good. You had the look. You had discipline. Why'd you stop?" Tony didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "My wife got sick." Stallone's chest tightened. "I had a choice. Take a role in New York or stay in LA and take care of her. I stayed." "How long?" 6 years. She passed in 82. I tried to get back into the business, but too much time had passed. Too many new faces. I ended up here. Figured if I couldn't be in the movies, I'd clean up after them. The silence between them turned heavy. Stallone wanted to say something. "I'm sorry. You deserved more. That's not fair." But none of it felt right. Tony spoke first. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "I never hated you for making it." Stallone looked up. "I mean it," Tony said. "You worked harder than anyone. You deserved it." Some people, they get bitter watching others succeed, but I never did. Why not? Because that 1 week on set, being part of something, that was enough for me. It reminded me that I could still dream, even if just for a little while. Therefore, Stallone felt something shift inside him. The guilt, the weight, the fame. All of it melted into something else. Gratitude. "You ever act again?" Stallone asked. Tony shook his head. "Nah, but I never stopped watching." They both smiled. A strange peace settled between them. But just as they stood to leave, Tony added one more sentence. "You know what else I kept?" Stallone turned, curious. Tony reached into his wallet and pulled out a photo. It was the same behind-the-scenes shot. But on the back, in faded ink, it said, "Don't forget who helped you fight." Stallone stared at it, stunned. "Who wrote that?" Tony looked away. "Your mom." Stallone's heart skipped. "My mom? She visited the set once, remember? Before filming started, I helped her find the lot. She gave me that picture and told me, 'He won't remember this day, but someday he'll remember you. Keep this safe.'" Stallone sank onto the bench again. He remembered the day vaguely, his mother getting lost, asking directions, Stallone being too busy with rewrites to walk her around. But Tony had done it. The whole time. Tony had been there, helping, quietly, silently, unseen. The weight of it all came rushing back. Every headline, every magazine cover, every standing ovation. And somehow, the man who once shared his shadow had never asked for more. Tony put the photo back in his wallet. "I'm retiring next month," he said. "Thought I'd go to Philly, see the statue, take one last picture on the steps." Stallone grinned. "Need a tour guide?" Tony blinked. "You serious?" As a right hook. They laughed, and in that laughter, years unspoken finally found their voice. Before they parted ways that night, Stallone did something unexpected. He asked the studio photographer to take a new photo. Not for press, not for the special. Just for them. He and Tony, standing together, smiling, present. And this time, Tony wasn't in the background. He was front and center. The photo went viral. Stallone hadn't planned it, neither had the studio. But someone on the crew posted it. Stallone with his arm around a janitor, captioned, "He was in Rocky Y. No one knew." Stallone never forgot. By morning, the internet had done its thing. Twitter flooded. Reddit exploded. Rocky Janitor trended worldwide. People were moved, deeply. The idea that a man who had stood behind the camera 50 years ago was still sweeping the floor and had just been honored by a legend. It struck something raw, something real, but not everyone was happy. The studio board called an emergency meeting. Marketing executives panicked. Is this going to distract from the documentary? Should we lean into it? Can we verify his story? They wanted control. They wanted spin. They wanted Tony to sign something, immediately. Stallone refused. "This isn't a stunt," he said. "It's a man's life." Still, pressure mounted. Journalists dug into Tony's past, old casting sheets, pay stubs, crew lists. Some outlets questioned it all. Was he really in Rocky? Janitor or storyteller, internet divided. Tony didn't say much. He never did. But Stallone noticed something in his posture, a quiet retreat. He stopped answering calls, stopped showing up for lunch, back to the shadows. One night, Stallone showed up at the studio unannounced. Tony was mopping the soundstage. "I didn't ask for this," Tony muttered. "I know. They're making it feel like I lied. You didn't. Doesn't matter. The moment got too big, and people don't like when nobody step into the light." Stallone took a long breath. "So what? You disappear again?" Tony didn't answer. He just kept mopping. The next morning, Stallone showed up on national television. He was scheduled to talk about Rocky's 50th. Instead, he did something else. He looked into the camera and said, "50 years ago, I was a guy nobody believed in. Broke, rejected, just another nobody trying to be seen. Then I met people like Tony, people who didn't have lines or credits, but they showed up, worked hard, lifted others without being asked. We celebrate the heroes in front of the camera, but it's time we start remembering the ones behind it too." It wasn't planned, but it went viral again. This time, bigger. Therefore, the studio couldn't ignore it. They invited Tony to the premiere of the Rocky 50th documentary. Red carpet, paparazzi, flashbulbs, velvet ropes. Tony didn't want to go. Stallone called him. "You earned this. I don't fit in there. You fit next to me." Still, Tony hesitated, until Stallone sent him something. A gift, wrapped in black velvet. Inside, a tailor-made replica of the original Rocky robe. On the back, "Tony the Quiet Fighter DeMarco," Tony cried. Then he said yes. The opening night. The lights blazed, reporters shouted, fans cheered. And for the first time in 5 decades, Tony walked beside Stallone, not behind him. People clapped. Some cried. Inside the theater, the film rolled. Stallone's voice narrated the rise of Rocky, the grit, the fight, the legacy. But then, halfway through, the unexpected happened. A new scene appeared. A quiet montage, old footage from the original set, behind the scenes. Laughter, sweat, candid moments. And in 2 separate shots, there was Tony, blurry in the background. But there, smiling, carrying a crate, holding a mic, laughing with crew, proof, undeniable. The footage had been rediscovered by an intern scanning old reels for B-roll. It hadn't been used in decades. No one had planned to include it. But after Stallone's interview, they rushed to splice it in. And the voiceover? Stallone recorded it that very morning. Some people shine for the camera. Others shine through time. Tony never asked for a spotlight. He just kept showing up. And now, we finally see him. When the lights came up, the theater was silent. Then, a standing ovation. But not for the film. For Tony. Outside, as the crowd thinned, Tony stood by the curb. He held the robe, still stunned. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. Stallone clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You already said it. You said it 50 years ago when you didn't quit." Tony smiled, and then the flash of a camera. A journalist leaned in. "Mr. DeMarco, do you have a message for the people out there who feel invisible?" Tony paused, then said softly, "You don't have to be in the spotlight to leave a mark. Sometimes just showing up is the bravest thing you can do." Later that night, back at home, Tony opened a box that had arrived by courier. Inside, a framed copy of the viral photo, a handwritten letter from Stallone. "You were never background. You were part of the foundation. Thank you for holding me up when no one else did. S." Tony held it to his chest. And in the quiet of his apartment, surrounded by silence and history, he finally allowed himself to believe it. He mattered, and the world had finally seen him. He almost didn't see the man. That line echoed in Stallone's mind as he stepped onto the steps of the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It had been weeks since the premiere, since the photo, since the world remembered someone they never knew they'd forgotten. But now, under a cold January sky, Stallone waited. The wind bit at his coat. Tourists buzzed nearby, posing in front of the rocky statue, but his eyes stayed fixed on the parking lot below. Then he saw him, Tony DeMarco, wearing the robe, carrying a duffel bag, smiling like a man who'd just climbed out of a dream. They didn't say much at first, just a nod, a handshake. Then, step by step, they began the climb. Not fast, not with power, but with purpose. Halfway up, Tony paused. Stallone turned. "You good?" Tony nodded. "Just taking it in." The city stretched behind them like a mural, gray, alive, unbothered. But up here it felt quiet, sacred. Tony reached into his bag and pulled out something. A small framed photo. His wife. He placed it gently on the edge of the step. "She believed in me," he whispered, "even when I forgot how." Stallone didn't reply. He just stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder, present. They reached the top together. The sun broke through the clouds. Light spilled across the concrete. Tony raised his arms, not in mockery, not in tribute, but in gratitude. The crowd below noticed. Some clapped, some took pictures. But Tony didn't care. For the first time in 50 years, he wasn't pretending to be in the movie. He was living it. Later, sitting quietly on the steps, Stallone turned to him. "You know," he said, "I've won awards, got my name on stars, seen my face on billboards in countries I've never been to." Tony listened. "But none of that hit me like that photo of you sweeping." Tony looked confused. "Why?" "Because it reminded me that legacy isn't about how loud the world claps. It's about who remembers you when no one's looking." Tony nodded, emotion thick in his throat. "I thought I was forgotten." "You weren't. But the world moves fast. Fame fades, trends pass, people forget." So Stallone did one more thing. He commissioned a plaque. Not flashy, not huge, just honest. It was installed on the studio lot near stage 12. It read, "To all the ones in the background, your presence built legends. In honor of Tony DeMarco, who showed up when it mattered most." And beneath it, a quote, "Don't forget who helped you fight." Therefore, Tony's story didn't end in silence. it became something else, a ripple, a reminder. In schools, teachers used the story to talk about humility and purpose. In offices, managers posted the quote above time clocks. In homes, people looked at their lives a little differently, wondering if maybe they too were part of something bigger. The last time Stallone and Tony met was quiet. No press, no cameras, just coffee. They sat in a diner near the studio, sunlight spilling through the blinds. Tony stirred cream into his cup slowly. "You ever miss it?" he asked. Stallone smirked. "Every damn day." Tony smiled. "Me too, even if I didn't know it at the time." They clinked mugs, not for victory, but for memory. Tony passed away 3 years later, peacefully, at home. Robe folded in his closet, that framed photo beside his bed. Stallone gave the eulogy. He didn't talk about Rocky. He talked about quiet strength, about unsung heroes, about a man who showed the world that you don't need a spotlight to leave a mark. Then he ended with this. He almost didn't see the man, but I did. And now, so do all of you. Thank you so much for watching. Your time means everything to us, and we hope this story moved you as much as it moved us. If it did, please consider leaving a comment, sharing the video, and subscribing to the channel, because powerful stories deserve to be heard. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never underestimate the impact of one small act of courage.